Hello. I'm so happy, Richard, that we can have this beautiful interview today. So my name is Bella Laurfeld, and today I'm going to have interview with Richard Owerly, and he's the director of Gender Bioenergetics Institute in North Carolina. Hello, Richard.
Hi, Bella. It's good to be with you and appreciate a chance to share some things with you that might be meaningful to other people as well.
I hope so, because for me, the gentle bioenergetics has changed my life and also my client's life. And my aim for that interview today is to have this knowledge and the information to spread the world that we have this kind of beautiful tool what Eva Reich has give us. So this is the reason why I ask you to make this interview, and I'm so happy that you agreed. So
Well, I'm very happy to do that. I appreciate having you study with me and learn about Eva's work, and I've enjoyed watching you develop skills in her work and begin using it with people, and also your interest in sharing this with other people in your part of the world. And I hope that this process will help facilitate your work and also be a way of your learning more and me learning more as we work to communicate what Eva Reich was doing in the world.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Okay, but let's start. And maybe I ask from you, what is the main purpose of gentle bioenergetics?
Well, I think in a very brief way, I would say that the purpose of gentle bioenergetics is to restore the natural flow of our life energy. And I sent you a quote that Eva said that if we understand that principle, that we can go a long way in this work. And if we don't understand that, then we're not going to go very far with it. And that gets down to that it's the most important thing in gentle bioenergetics is the process and observing the process as one interacts with other people. It's watching, observing how people stop or impede their energetic flow and helping them to become aware of that and how they do that, where that came from, where they learned to do to stop their flow. And then also to help them to understand how they, from within themselves, can change that so that their energy is flowing. And if one thinks of gentle bioenergetics as just tools and techniques and the therapist doing something for people, people miss the whole purpose. People will miss the understanding, the depth of what Eva Reich was doing as I watched her work with people and as she taught me to work with people.
Beautiful.
So that might bring some other questions too that you would think about in relationship to that.
But what do you think, what makes this therapy form or this Eva Reich work so unique if you compare another therapies, for example?
I think that would go back to the very first time I went to watch Eva Reich work. And it's been a process, that was 1985, 35 plus years ago, almost 40. And it's been an ongoing process to understand just what that meant when I was watching her. The first workshop I went to, when I watched her working with individuals, and I had been in the therapy world. This is 1985 when I met her, and I had been in the therapy world since 1968. I had seen many different models of therapy and of working with people. I'd experienced many of them as well. And I'm very lucky to have gotten that experience by working in an agency and many people working in different ways and presenting methods, how they worked, and observing that, ranging from social workers to psychiatrists to psychologists, and opportunities for training programs. And I could pretty well guess what the therapist would do next when there was something happening in their process, having seen so many for so many years. When I watched Eva Reich work, what was amazing to me the very first time I watched her was I never knew what she was going to do next. One time a person lied down on a mat, which was common. I'd seen that. And usually I'd seen a therapist do something to stimulate something. And Eva just sat there and watched the person, didn't do anything. And all of a sudden, some tears started to come down the person's face. And whoa, where'd that come from? She didn't do anything. She didn't touch the person.
No stimulation at all.
She didn't ask anything. She just watched. And that happened over and over again. Sometimes somebody curled up like a little baby. And you just said, okay, somebody just stay with them. We'll come back to them in a little bit. And every session was different. There wasn't a usual, typical process. And to me, it was like magic. It was somehow or other, Eva Reich was working inside the person. Instead of having an idea of how it ought to be, and you do this, you do that, you do this, you do that, and this happens and that happens, and the person is done and they go their way. There wasn't any of that. It was just like observing the person. And that's what was very attractive to me, is I began to think it was the tools, the techniques. She had 30-some different techniques when I counted them up one time of working with people. And I thought, okay, if the magic is in the tools, and if I learn how to do the techniques, then I'll be doing that. And what I discovered along the way, the tools and techniques are wonderful. But that's not exactly what Eva Reich was doing. One could do gentle bioenergetics without even doing any of the techniques, just by observing how people stop their energy and then helping them to understand how they can change so that they more fully experience and enjoy life. And the tools are only a way of enhancing that process, the techniques of helping the person to understand from within themselves how they're doing that. And the therapist learns as well. So that's my experience, goes back to that original process of watching her observe people. And it's the process that's more important than specific tools or techniques. In addition to that, it's Eva believed that we approach people as equals when we work with them. In working with you, I've learned a lot from you and watching you work with people, and I've learned a lot in how I might train people from my students. As my students may practice with me, I learned what techniques, what ways I'm teaching are effective and not effective. I had a student one time who said some words to me when they were working with me, and I thought, those words are terrible. And I thought, but those were my words that the person learned from me. And when we were done, I simply said to my student, the therapist, I said, by the way, don't ever say that to anybody again. You got it from me, and it's worthless. It's not any good. And so in that observation, we learn for ourselves. So Eva very much believe we approach people as equals, not as we're up here and somebody else is down here, or I know more than they know. And I tell my students, if you'll approach working with people that you'll learn more about life from them than you'll ever teach them, you'll be successful.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
If you begin to think you're going to teach them how to live, then you may as well quit doing this stuff, because that's not going to, you're not going to be very effective.
Yeah, but can you say, Richard, what was the X factor of Eva, that how she worked with people? How can she make the space that people can open up them? What was the X factor there? Because you say that the tools are not so important than the process, right?
Well, I didn't say they're not important. I said they're not the magic. Mm-hmm. They're like magic, but they're not the magic. Mm-hmm. I think it was her accepting people as equals, mm-hmm. unconditionally loving the people, trying to figure out how to do that in her process, and being a servant to them, just observing, just being there to be with them and observing. I think that she often used the phrase, watch like a hawk. And I think that was consistent with what she was doing, is watching and observing people in how they're doing things in life, both in their body as well as in their living experience, and where they learn to do that. Mm-hmm. That was stopping them from getting where they wanted to go. So I think the X factor was willing to work with inside the person, what was going on within them, rather than how she thought they should live out their lives. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. But can you describe, for example, in what kind of life situations we can use the tools and we can use this kind of therapy?
One of the difficulties in some ways working with gentle bioenergetics is it's so broad that it actually works. It's one of the beautiful things. It can work from pre-birth, helping people get pregnant who are having difficulty from an energetic standpoint, not from a medical standpoint, but from an energetic standpoint. That's our process. Medical doctors, midwives, they're working from a different process. They can use gentle bioenergetics, but they're also doing things we don't do in gentle bioenergetics. Many of us are not medical doctors. Eva Reich was a medical doctor, and she could do some of those things. But we could work helping moms get ready to connect with their baby, or to get pregnant, or to deliver the baby. And it can also work with other kinds of experiences throughout life. Trauma that we experience, any trauma that we experience, to reconnect the energetic flow after the trauma happens. And it can be helpful in times of death. Eva once said that in the beginning, the energetic waves of birth get to where the baby comes. They're there in death too, become further and further apart as somebody is leaving. So as somebody begins, they become closer together as the birth happens. And so it can be used with all ages in all settings. But the other thing is not everything is about gentle bioenergetics. So sometimes people need to go to somebody else. If one's living in conditions that are moldy, bacterially infested, I don't care how much gentle bioenergetics you do with a person, it's not going to be very effective. So many people in the world tonight or today are looking for where they're going to eat and where they're going to sleep tonight. And they may not have time to do gentle bioenergetics. We're kind of fortunate, very lucky that we can even be talking about this now. So there's other things that are important to understand and to know. And what our realm is that we can work with in helping people. And there's some things we don't have the power to do that.
Yeah, but also you have very beautifully described that we can use the tool before the pre-verbal state, like when we are in a mother womb also, that we can have the feelings and emotions when we are like little babies.
Right. Eva Reich, as others had experienced, was aware that many people were suffering in life because of their beginnings, that they were maybe an unwanted, unplanned child. Maybe mother was depressed and they picked up on that depression as that's what it is to be alive, or fear. She called it the familiar in utero emotion. The birth experience often impacted people in such a way that they lived repetitive patterns in life based on that and things that happen the first 2 years of life when there isn't verbal memory, but there's body memory, energetic memory. And that's a very significant part of gentle bioenergetics, is understanding how our beginnings impact what we're doing in our life now. And Eva believed the earliest strata, like in archaeology, is where you find those roots often. There are other places, but other things happen to people, but that's frequently. So the difference in gentle bioenergetics is many therapeutic models talk about that, cognitive. What Eva had was some specific tools that could help people to connect with those energetic body memories, such as psychodrama birth and metamorphosis and other ways that people could get back into re-experiencing where that energy got stopped, and they can then find a way to free it up and to move on through life. So that's a very special area. It was also an area that she realized that if that's a problem, maybe we ought to work to change birthing practices. And so she worked around the world as part of that movement to change birthing practices to enhance the beginnings of babies and mothers coming into the world. And that's almost an overwhelming task in many ways, because with what's happening in our world today, babies are being born in the midst of war, in the midst of terrorism, of violence. And those are not good beginnings per se. They're being born as a result of rapes and abuse. And those are not good beginnings. And a world that is not invested in the health of the baby and the mother has problems, and they're going to have serious problems all along, because there is not that bonding, that connection, that beginning root. And so Eva began working in that area, and then she learned a lot as she worked with mothers, pregnant mothers. She began to learn that you could do things much faster than she was trained. As she worked with pregnant mothers, and there was such flexibility, she could help the mother to become open to her energetic wave in her body so that the birth became easier. And the mother could do that as she worked with Eva. Eva could help her to understand how she closed herself down, how she could open herself under that stress of giving birth. And then she took that to apply that to her work with other adults, that they also could open in that way, in a much faster way than she had been taught. She had observed in working with her father, Wilhelm Reich. So it was like she went back and forth. She saw so much trauma that was the result of bad beginnings that she went back and worked to change that. And then in working in that area, she learned things she brought forward to work with people that had gone through that. So that was a core thing for Eva Reich, the good beginnings, the process.
Okay, thank you. But now our listener can maybe think that, okay, how it works and does it work? Do you have some kind of beautiful healing story from your practice, or maybe from Eva practice you can share that people can feel how, yes, this is work and it's so gentle, but it's anyway it works. Do you have some beautiful healing story to tell us?
Many. My own story. In my own work, my own personal story is I was an unwanted, unplanned child. And Eva, I guess at one time saw that because of the symptoms I shared with her. We'd done a wonderful workshop, and I said to Eva, when it was over, she called me and said, "How are you doing?" I said, "I'm depressed." It was a great workshop. A lot of wonderful things happened for people and for me. But I was depressed after it was over. And she said, "Okay, I want you to get with your friend who does things with you and have her do this particular technique 3 days in a row." Well, it was a technique, Eva said, you only do it once a week. And I thought, okay, 3 days in a row, she's pretty serious. And unfortunately, I didn't ask her how come. I didn't ask her what she saw. I just said, okay, Eva suggested, I'm going to go and do it. And my mother had told me when I was about 20 years old, around 20, that she didn't want me. She didn't plan to have me. And she didn't tell me that to like heal that experience or to connect for us. She told me that because she was afraid that I would be on my father's side going through a divorce and I would abandon her, and that my grandmother would tell me the story as making my mother look bad. And the key statement was, no woman wants to have a second baby after having had a first baby. Well, that's not true. That's brainwashing. Mm-hmm. But some women don't, but not every woman. And it's not an excuse for her. But at 20 years old, I didn't know any better. I had a very, very naive development around sexuality. My parents didn't talk to me. They didn't tell me anything. My dad didn't help me with that. And so I just kind of shrugged it. Oh, well, Now, this was when I was 20 years old. Some 20 years later, after being in a workshop with Eva, she saw something. And I went back, we did this tool where often one experiences the energetic memories of that experience and what it was like. And my experience was, it's a very gentle tool. The touch is very light that they do. It's a stimulation on the foot. It's like a reflexology, but just very, very light, very gentle on the reflex line into the spinal cord. I don't know why it works, but somehow it's like magic. And what I became aware of is that there was a struggle for survival for me. And later people told me that my mother was dead. I couldn't talk to her. My dad was dead. No one was really around. But some people did tell me they remembered that my mother was very, very depressed around my birth, and depressed before and depressed afterwards. And I guess my grandmother was somewhat afraid she was going to harm herself, her mother.
Mm-hmm.
So all of a sudden, all that started to make sense of what was going on in my life. And a dramatic change happened. That's why this tool is called metamorphosis. It's like the caterpillar becoming the butterfly. As a result of that, I had been living within 20 minutes of where I was born. I would, whenever I was somewhere else working, I felt like I had to get back there. It was like a compulsion that was safety. And so I was there thinking I'd live in that area 20 minutes away from where I was born the rest of my life and content doing what I was doing. And then all of a sudden it opened up a bigger world. And I no longer had to go back there. I no longer wanted to go back there. And I wanted to be out doing things in a bigger world. So my world went from 20 minutes from where I was born to doing things in Europe, to doing things in Singapore, to doing things in South America. It was like, whoa, my whole world changed. And one time with another associate, I was sitting in Poland, in Warsaw, in a chocolate store that made candy and ice cream and chocolate. Half the building had been blown away by the Nazis in World War II. It was just, and it had been rebuilt. It was a famous company. And I said to the person, if somebody would have told me when I was in high school that at 60 some years old, 70 some years old, I would be sitting in Warsaw eating ice cream, I would have said, you're crazy. Wow. But there I was. And all of a sudden I realized my world was much bigger. And I pretty much attribute that to learning where I shut myself down. And even now, sometimes when I go into places, I'm always wondering, am I wanted there? Mm-hmm. Am I accepted? And that's something that lasts for people who are unwanted, unplanned, sometimes a lifetime. Mm-hmm. But trauma is unique to each person. It doesn't always pick people.
Yeah. But what do you think, Richard? What happened? What happened? What Eva did for you? How could you go to travel and have trainings all over the world? What happened with you? Can you open up this change a little bit?
Well, that was like the magic. It was the sense of finding the root within myself of where I had shut down and didn't expand. Another therapist had said, Dick, make your world bigger. And I didn't know how to do that because it was a bioenergetic memory from within. It wasn't a conscious verbal decision. It was from inside me. When, in using one of the techniques, I became aware of the decision I made, not a conscious decision, but an unconscious process within myself of closing in and hanging on.
Yeah.
Then I somehow had the freedom to flow.
Yeah.
Eve often talked about if you get one little hole in the dam, all kinds of things happen. And that's been my experience with this around the world as I work with people, with you, with others. When I meet somebody in a workshop and I have an impression of where they are, it was like in, I'm not going to say the person's name, but in Estonia, you were in the program and we had a woman there. I think it was the first time I was there. And she was very gray looking, very old looking. And she bought all the books. I worked with her a little bit. Other people worked with her. And I don't think anybody expected anything and I was surprised she bought all the books. I went away. I came back 6 months later and she was different. And I went away again, came back 6 months later, and people said she's out doing things. She had bought clothes that were not black or gray. She was in color. And she was out. She wasn't there at that program because she was out doing other things. Mm-hmm. And I don't think I did anything. Just to listen to her story and to maybe help her identify from in herself what was going on. And then some kind of way she opened herself up to do other things. And I haven't seen her since. So, but other people tell me what the person is doing. Those are some of the things. The other magical things I've seen, I saw one man that we worked with. He was a professor, but professors in universities often have 8 o'clock classes in the morning in the United States, or they have meetings at 8 o'clock in the morning, maybe even 7 o'clock. He didn't like to get up till noon. And he, really neat guy, he's very prominent in environmental studies, environmental work, very genius, a member of Mensa. And we worked with him. And one time we did what we call a psychodrama birth with him in a gentle way, a safe way. And when we were working with it, all of a sudden in the middle of it, he just stopped and became like a rock. Now, this guy was very little, smaller than you are.
Oh, really?
Yeah, very little. And when we were trying to kind of very gently bring him out of the birth experience, we couldn't move him. And I had big 250-pound men. I don't know what that is in European measurement.
Yeah, it's like
kilos.
80, 90 kilos. Yeah, something like that.
Big.
Yes.
And we could move them out as we go. With him, he was like a rock. And what the experience is that he had anesthetic at birth. And apparently too much, because he remembered in his experience of working with that experience, that physical experience, just everything stopped. And it was at the point of where mom was given a lot of anesthetic to get the birth, maybe to save her life. Sometimes that happens. After that, he bought a boat and started sailing on the river. He started getting up earlier in the morning and enjoying life. He started going to bed earlier. He changed his lifestyle. Before, he didn't want to get out of bed. It wasn't because that's the lifestyle necessarily he wanted. That's true for some people, but that's energetically inside. That's what it felt like he needed to do. Don't come out. It was like a rock. And then sunshine came up. He was ready to go. He was ready to go out on his boat. He was ready to go to meetings. He was ready everything changed in his life. And so that's our gentle process, but working with some of the roots of where this stuff begins.
Wow, these are beautiful stories. And actually, these stories leads to our next questions. That in gentle bioenergetics is said that we have the life energy, which is flowing like freely in our body. But in a life we have traumas, and after the trauma we have like armor, like blockage in the body, and this life energy is not flowing freely. So how can people know that they have this kind of armor, and how to melt the armor in the body?
Mhm. You've got a very clear understanding of what gentle bioenergetics is, and that it's becoming aware of that armor, and that's the process of gentle bioenergetics. I guess in gentle bioenergetics, it's helping people to observe what is armor for them. And sometimes it can be in the muscular structure where the muscles are tight or constricted, and people can experience that. They understand when their jaw is tight, eyes get tight, or in like pregnancy, it's a problem if the pelvis gets tight and doesn't come forward and relax in the birth process. It can be a problem. It can also be that people don't show their emotions in their eyes, or that people restrict their breathing. And we don't teach proper breathing. It's more how they're stopping themselves. And then if the energy begins to flow, the breathing will restore itself in that process. Sometimes it goes very deep in the body. You get psychosomatic symptoms. So I think in understanding armor, it's helping people to observe that, for instance, like it's normal to move. You watch babies, children, it's normal for them to move. When they're not moving, it's not normal. Mm-hmm. And so when adults carry that structure into life and they're just very still, there's no movement. There's no physical movement when they're working, say, on a mat, or there's also no movement in life. And maybe they have a whole lot of energy, you can see it, but there's no movement. Or maybe people are just very pale, very white. There's no color. And where'd that happen? Where did that energy contract so much inside? Sometimes people say they've been depressed all their life. And that's a mechanism where maybe they picked up on mom's depression, and that's what it is to feel alive, is to feel depressed. And that can be a repetitive pattern and can come back. It's one of the things about gentle bioenergetics is that I've learned, and it's true of all therapy, is there is no perfect person. Mm. There is no one who has arrived. There's always those experiences do not get totally resolved. What we're looking for is to restore the flow in such a way that people can experience all of life in a more efficient, effective way than they were in the past. So again, I think it's observation of helping them to observe what's going on in their body and their energetic fields, their psychosomatic issues, and how that's impacting their life and where the roots of that stuff comes from. And they'll pretty much tell you as when they come in and what it is they would like to be different in their lives. And there are some people who don't need to come to therapy. They haven't necessarily gone through this, or if they have some stuff, they've also found a way to
Mm.
keep themselves flowing. Some kind of, Eve often said she was amazed, in Europe at least, of some people who had gone through so many horrible things in the war or wars, and yet they still remained open, loving, and caring people. And they may not need therapy, or they may not need gentle bioenergetics unless they run into something that then they sense, I need some help with this.
And sometimes it can also be so unconscious that you even don't know that you have this kind of armor, that some things in the life is like repeating.
Yeah.
Over and over again.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is interesting. All right, but the founder.
Sometimes those people don't come for help. They're caught in that process, and they're not going to come into the process of getting help for that. And those are the people we probably won't see come through the door to work with.
Yeah. But the founder of Gentle Bioenergetics was Eva Reich. And
yes.
Eva Reich was a daughter of William Reich. But in somehow the father and daughter was so different in personalities and their work. But in some point, Eva found that her father's work was like profound, and she started to use the tools what William Reich used. Can you, Richard, maybe a little bit talk or describe what was the Eva's journey, how she found her father tools, and maybe a little bit also what kind of relationships they had, and what have made this gentle bioenergetics as we use it today?
I only know a little bit about that. I can't say that I have quite a bit of information, but not. There are other people, I think, that probably were closer to Eva as a friend, maybe even her daughter, who would know more about that than I really know. Our relationship was one of, I was her student, and then I was her associate, in the sense, or assistant, and I wrote material down and working with her, and that was kind of the focus that we had. She shared a lot of her personal life and story with me, but maybe not to the extent to fully answer what you're asking. She often would say she grew up with this. When I was talking about if I was representing it right, if I was doing it right, she said, yes, you got it. But she also would say, I grew up with it. You've learned it. It was natural for me because I grew up with it. So you need to figure that out, and for you, and share that with your people, that where you're coming from as you talk about it, that you're coming from a citizen of the United States, which makes you different than many of the people in the world. You're coming from a white position, which also makes you different than many people in the world. You're middle class, which makes you different than many people in the world. It doesn't mean you can't interact with people, but it's important to be aware of your biases, aware of your roots, so that you can do that. And she said, I grew up with it. She grew up with her mother and father involved in this. When her father was working with Freud, she remembered him coming to the house dressed in clothes that he was going to go over the mountains to Scandinavia to escape from Hitler and Stalin. And he said goodbye. He came to say goodbye to them. And to children. And she remembered that. She was younger. She was born in 1924, I think it was. And so a lot of things had already gone on with Reich in his work before she got into it. But then she and her mother, when her mother and her father split, they tried to brainwash Eva against her father. That was the one thing she said. People tried to brainwash her against him, that he was crazy. And then she and her mother fled to the United States, and she somehow or other got reconnected with her father. And she liked his work. She was fascinated with his research. And she was studying to be a doctor, and she was fascinated with his blood tests and what he was showing. She was fascinated with the energetic part of his work, with the way that he was working in terms of cancer and things like that back then, this 1950s, 40s. So that part, she became his assistant. I often would say, from what others said, that she was his closest assistant. Eva said, no, you can't say that. I got it on tape. I was only one of many. And she didn't want that elevated sense of importance. She just was one of many. And that's characteristic, I think, of what I see as important in this process is we're one of many. We're not the most, I'm not the most important. It's a process for many people. And she has many other students in Europe. I'm not the only one. Some of them have passed on. Some of them are still alive. And so she also sensed that she and her father could argue a lot. In fact, the continual development of butterfly touch massage, which you're familiar with, part of that was the result. They had a big argument, as I understand it. And she went off and did an internship at Harlem Hospital. And she took her understanding of this gentle touch and a pattern she developed called butterfly touch massage and used it on premature babies in Harlem Hospital and found out it worked and was amazed and began to work with birth there in the hospital and found these Haitian women who had the easiest births because they would sing spirituals and their body would open. And so it was out of some of those arguments that she grew. She watched his very gentle touch with babies and children, and that's the part of the work that she was attracted to and felt that's the way you should work with everybody. She felt like her father was too controlling, too authoritarian, even with her, trying to tell her what she should do and shouldn't do. And that he would tell people who they should marry and who they shouldn't marry, and trying to have perfect mothers to have perfect babies. And Eva's response was, we're not going to be perfect. We're not perfect, and get over it. Women are never going to be perfect. And she felt he had no business telling people what they should work, who they should marry. She said she wasn't exactly a feminist, but she was getting the ideas of it. And this was way back when, before that was even kind of common. But she was very much into the equality of all people, men, women, and even children's. She was very much into children's rights and the health of the child. So there were many things they were together on. Reich was very invested in the importance of the development of the child. Eva was very much into that and the birth, but they had a little bit of a different approach to it in terms of their personalities. I was fortunate enough to hear one of Reich's original students in the United States talk, and I did butterfly touch massage on him. He said, I said, I could feel the streaming. And he said that he knew Eva Reich. He said she had a very soft energy, gentle energy, and that Reich was more intense. And maybe that's part of the big difference. So Eva felt comfortable disagreeing with her father, arguing with her father, and he with her, I guess. But I didn't know Reich, so I don't really know his side of the process or how he viewed it. I think it was a time where, and I don't know where he was with equality. He was a product of the generation of where men and women were not considered equal. But again, I don't know how he approached that. Most of the people who were involved with him were men. And men in an age of where their lives and their sexuality interests were different than when people get older. And Eva was very much aware of that the development of this work and the understanding was of those men who were 40 years old, 50 years old, and don't know where that developed when they got to be 70 and 80. And so I don't know that I have a really good answer for all of that, except you're right. Apparently the personalities were very different. Reich wanted to change the world and be out there doing it. Eva wanted to change the world, but she wanted to do it as a recluse on a organic farm hidden away in Maine. She wanted to change the world, but she didn't want to be out there
fighting,
broadcasting all of this. She wanted to do it more from a different position.
And she lived also like very simple life. You have described how simple life Eva was living in that time.
That's true. Eva had a small farm, grew stuff organically when organic wasn't the kind of in thing. And she also lived very simply around the world. She gave away a lot of her money to help other people. And as a result, when she was at the end of her life, her daughter, maybe her sister too, but her daughter worked for her to live at home and die at home, which was part of the older, not just natural birth at home, but also natural death at home. And she worked for her mother to be able to do that. And some of the people in Europe, and I had a little bit of money then, so sometimes we helped contribute a little bit to that. But her daughter was the one who carried most of that and figured that out. And daughter's a beautiful person. Renata Moise, Eva's daughter, to me, embodies gentle bioenergetics. If you want to see gentle bioenergetics at work, find a way to observe Renata Moise doing some of her presentations for the Reich Center now. She embodies that, what I saw Eva teaching around the world. She embodies that as her daughter. And I don't know if she really knows that, but it's what I see as I observe her. She's very, very caring, loving, gentle as she approaches people and works with people.
Wow, it's beautiful. It's beautiful story about Eva and how simply she was living and how simply she left that life. So it's beautiful, yes. But Richard.
One of the interesting things is another story about that is that I attended Eva's memorial service to talk about her work. My role was to talk about her work around the world. Because actually nobody in Maine knew much about her work around the world where she lived. Apparently she didn't talk much about it at her home. She was just one of the people in her community. She did things, but she wasn't out there self-promoting. She wasn't a self-promoting person in her own community. She was a part of her community. And one of the people, it was kind of her life. She was one of the people, not the person. And their caretaker was always, she said in life, she was always trying to learn how to live in the here and now. That was one of her big things. I may not be presenting her talk, but she was talking about having been Eva's caregiver at the end. And she walked in one day and Eva was in bed and she was saying to her, she was an invalid, and she was saying, listen to the birds out the window. They're singing. It's morning. They're just singing away. And she kind of, as I remember, she said, Eva was living in the here and now. She kind of captured that in her essence without doing all these kinds of things that we do in getting into yoga and all those kinds of things, meditation, to learn how to live in the here and now. She was just doing it in a very simple way. Mm. And I think that's probably true. Eva wasn't perfect. She got so angry with me one time, she said, I never want to work with you again. And we wrote the book afterwards together. So I guess we resolved that somehow. But she could get very angry all of a sudden and say things like that.
But Richard, if you can describe Eva in one sentence, what kind of sentence it will be?
Oh, wow. I guess my initial reaction is Eva was far more complex than to be able to describe her in one sentence. Mm. I think that what she might address to is she was very much interested in healing prayer and unconditional love. And I think she might say something like, she hoped that she was successful in being a servant to humanity and washing their feet.
Wow.
That might be something that would be the image of capturing what she did.
Beautiful. It reminds me like little bit like Mother Teresa in somehow, I don't know why, when you're like describing, the picture is coming.
I would put her in that category. Mm. She gave stuff away. Another story is, and it captures the essence of this gentle touch as well. It captures the whole, it maybe it's a little vignette that captures all of what Eva was doing. Eva had finished a lecture somewhere in Europe. I don't know if it was Germany or someplace. And after she was done, there was a woman who came up with about a 2-year-old little boy coming up behind her, bouncing around as 2-year-old little boys do, or little girls, children, just jumping, having fun, coming up. And she came up to Eva and she said, "I want to thank you." And she said to Eva that 2 years ago, I came up to you with my baby boy in my arms, and the doctors had said he was going to die. He wasn't thriving, and they didn't know what to do. They couldn't get him to thrive. And I was crying, and I asked you, "Is there anything I can do?" And you were in a hurry to get to your airplane because you needed to make the connection. But you risked missing your airplane, taking the time to show me butterfly touch massage that I could do on my baby. She said, "That's all that I did on my baby." And you can see he's thriving. That's, I guess, that gentle observing what was going on and risking. Her missing her airplane. And many of the gurus of this circuit that goes around teaching people everywhere in the world won't do that. That's evil.
You can't miss the plane.
Yeah, they would say, "I don't have time to do that." I've known of people to do that. And it's in part why I got to learn Eva Reich's work. One person said about me and was angry that Eva was having me write the book or letting me teach the things. He didn't do it. So he said, "He's a nobody. Why are you doing this with Dick?" And that's true. I don't have a famous name. I'm not Reich. My name's not Reich. I'm just someone who learned her work and thought this deserves to be preserved, and undertook that mostly because no one else was. And but it was a gift that Eva gave to me as part of my legacy. And my legacy was to preserve it as her work, and not as mine. In part, it's somewhat my legacy now because of what I've done with it, but it's her work, it's her gift. And that's part of the work, and that's part of the work you're involved with us, is further preserving her legacy, my giving it to you and some other people in Europe and places who will carry it on. But it's not only carrying on gentle bioenergetics, butterfly touch massage, but it's carrying on what you've asked, the principles, one could teach her tools, but if you don't understand the process, or if they don't understand the process of what she was doing and her life, then you miss out on something. And I don't do it the way she did it. And other people won't do it the way I do it. But there's that little bit of the questions that you've asked are the kinds of questions, the answers to those are the part of what makes it uniquely Eva Reich's work.
Yeah, thank you for sharing these heart-opening stories. And I feel that there is so much more behind the words, what you said, Dick.
Yeah.
Thank you for making the
That's
space.
why I say it's the process. It's not the techniques. They're magical, but it's the process that makes them magical.
And I feel the magic now. I feel when you're describing these stories about Eva, I feel the magic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't get that when I first watched her work. As everybody else, I focused in on the tools because I'm a fixer. I like tools. I like techniques. But it was later on that I began to realize, and I probably teach the stuff differently now. Every year, I hope I teach it a little bit differently. And grasping more the understanding of what's involved.
And also you have so many times you have told me that, Bella, it's not about the tools, it's about the process. And I remember that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. There are some things that I learned that probably are fundamental. In that. So.
Beautiful. But
I guess the other one is, as we work with people, the thing that has stuck with me and that has benefited other people that I've passed on, it comes from Eva Reich, is that when people are telling what's happened to them, or when they're involved in the discharge of the emotion from that experience, is to remember it's only a story. It's their story. It's not just only a story, it's their story. And it's something they've experienced before and they survived, and they can experience it again now, to be free of it, to live their life out differently. And the person working with it and understanding that it's their story, instead of getting scared, instead of feeling helpless, instead of being judgmental, instead of denying the story. There's so many ways we can get our own stuff in the way, is just to realize it's their story. And that was the other, I think, fundamental thing that I got from Eva Reich. Listening to people's stories.
Yes. But Richard, you have been in that field like more than 2 decades. And you have like giving the lectures and trainings all over the world, like in Asia, in Europe, in States. Can you tell me, after all that, what has been the biggest impact for you in that field, in gentle bioenergetics?
Well, I go back to the stories. The biggest impact is hearing people's stories. And just sometimes I feel like all that's happened is so overwhelming in the world, and I can't do that much. And sometimes I wonder, is what I'm doing even worthwhile? And then somebody tells me their story and of how what they learned about themselves changed their lives. It's not so much that I did it, I didn't do it. It's just sharing what my experience was, that they have means to discover their own processes. And I've got to meet the best people in the world by doing this somewhat the way Eva did it. by living amongst the people instead of staying in expensive hotels, or which couldn't afford to do anyway, and the people that I've trained can't afford that. But I've gotten to meet the people who really care about people. I've got to learn about the people in their own countries. And I've got to learn about people in Estonia and Latvia and Lithuania, what they went through in the Russian times, or still the Russian times, I guess, and their histories. And I've gotten to meet the best people in the world, the people who care about other people. I haven't met the people who are making the decisions that are destructive to people. I've met the people that want to help other people. And I think that's probably what Eva got to do. And she was teaching this at a grassroots level of meeting the people who were the mothers and who cared about other people. And I've seen things and experienced things and witnessed things that I didn't learn by living in the United States and going to school in the United States. I got exposure to, and just a very small exposure, not that extensive, but it's been life-changing for me to see how other people in the world live and experience things.
Beautiful. Okay, I will ask last question about in our interview. In our life, there is so much stress and people are struggling and they have traumas and they have like a lot of things happening. What do you recommend for people? How to find the balance in their life, or how to live like happily? What are the tools, or where they can find the peace, the inner peace? Where to start? You go to the past, or the way, or you find your potential in the life. What are some kind of recommendations or something what you can tell the people that how to live the life happily?
One could write a whole book on that.
Sure.
That's the essence of many of the spiritual paths. What's the meaning of life? What's health? My initial reaction is to say the answer to that is what I tell clients that I meet or students when they ask, okay, what can I read about this? What can I go home and study about this? And sometimes I have some answers, but most of the time I say to them, go play. Go play. If reading is your play, then read novels. read cartoons. Read joke books. But my sense is that I think it's important that people have some kind of spiritual connection. whatever that is for the person. It doesn't have to be what mine is. That's one thing I've learned is I have my spiritual connection. I understand life in terms of that. But it doesn't have all the answers. And I think it's important that a person has that sense of other in a spiritual connection. I find people who have that often do better. But then I also think that some of them that they can take that to the extreme too, and then they end up miserable. Not everything is gentle bioenergetics. Not everything is spiritual. It's like, I think, I think maybe a story from my grandson comes to mind. My grandson was coming to visit me. He was about 2 years old. And I was living in the mountains then in North Carolina. And they were coming for a holiday. And I thought, okay, I know this trail with big rocks that he can go and climb on these big rocks. And it'll be beautiful for him. And we can get a nice long walk up this trail into the mountain. And his dad and the rest of the family wants to walk and see the scenery. And he can climb on these big rocks. Just a beautiful place to climb. Perfect. So we got in the car. We're driving up there. We get in the parking lot and we park. He gets out of the car. Over there's the trail. We start to walk. And he sees some little rocks on the ground. And he bends down and he starts to play with those little rocks. And I know, come on. We got to go to up there. It's up there. No, he wants to play with the little rocks. He didn't have to go anywhere else. He could have spent the day playing with those little rocks just off the parking lot on the first part of the trail. Maybe he would have explored a little more. But that was his world. That was his. And I had this bigger vision of what would be better for him. And he taught me it's about living in the here and now, about just playing, exploring what was there. And maybe he had the key to life. Maybe he was teaching his dad and I, and he could teach all the other people what it was really about. It was just seeing what's there and playing with what's there. Instead of all this drama or gigantic things. So it's a very big question. Maybe it deserves a simple answer like that.
I like the combination of play and spiritual like combination. It's simple. Yeah. Let it be like that.
Yeah. Reich, I guess, had a definition of health that the ability to experience everything in life, all of the emotions, and to stand it. That may be too technical, but there's some grain of truth in it. But I think maybe it's not in words. Maybe what my grandson is showing is it's in the process. There's back to the process. The process of just living.
and the life is very simple. You don't need much, you know. You need maybe the small rocks.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So thank you, Richard. Thank you
Okay.
for your interview. Thank you for your time, and thank you for these beautiful stories about Eva, about you, about life energy, and about gentle bioenergetics.
Thank you for your interest. It's every time I do something like this, it is kind of enlightening for me, and thinking about where I've evolved and what's kind of most important in all of this process. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much, and I really hope that we can meet in Europe soon.
Yeah, and thank you for your interest and your interest in carrying on some of this. And I think in watching you work, watching how you connect with people, and the training we did in Estonia, that I think, and I had said then that I think you can do this work. Maybe it would be better to say, I think you can do this process and use the various things that are a part of it to pass on Eva Reich's gifts with it.
Yes, I will do it with honor. I will do it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And
Okay.
we will keep in touch.
All right.
Thank
So
you.
we're good? Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay.